Welcome to Career Cravings with your hosts, Dev Ramcharan and Megan Reed. If you crave a better and more satisfying career, this show is for you. We're broadcasting live on Bold Radio Station every week. Now, here are your hosts, Dev and Megan.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Career Cravings. I'm Megan Reed, and I'm coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. Today, I am actually hosting my first show alone. Both of my co-hosts are away with their families. It is Mother's Day today, and so they are celebrating with their kids and with their families. And because I'm the only one without kids, I'm here with you on my own. Well, I guess not really on my own because I do have a guest. My guest tonight is Jess Ferrero, and she's also with us in Toronto, Canada. We're going to have a bit of a different episode tonight. So as some of our regular listeners know, a lot of the time we have guests who are pretty well established in their careers, and they're giving us insight into how they made the choices they made, how they got to the point that they are in their career. And in this case, Jess is a millennial like me. She has some really interesting background experiences. But with her today, as you can tell from the title of the show, we're going to really dig into her background, and we're going to use that information to help her continue to move forward in her career and with career planning. And I think this will be an interesting episode for you because this is some of the ways that we work with our clients in career counseling. When you're planning your career, the way I like to look at things is everything that's happened from this point back is really information. And if you don't look at that information, it's hard to use it in order to move forward. So that's what we're going to do with Jess. We're really going to dig in, examine what she's done so far, the choices she's made, why she's made those choices, so we can help her with her future career planning. So I guess to start off, welcome to the show, Jess.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So just to get us started, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your career path so far and some of the highlights along the way?
Yeah, so as you said, it's been a little unconventional. I have a very, let's say, rich history of experience behind me. I actually started off as a dancer when I was in high school. And was very, and still am, very passionate about dance and movement and creativity. So my first, I guess, experience with a professional career was in high school. I was working at my local dance studio. I was teaching and I was helping with the competitive girls, getting ready for their auditions for big schools, and I was auditioning for big dance schools as well. And then I went off onto the dance program at George Brown, and I danced there for 2 years. And then just was kind of exploring that industry and what that looked like for me. Went back to school and was working in interior design. So that's another very creative industry, and got a lot of really great experience there. I was working on television shows. I was working downtown with a bunch of amazing designers and some of the high-end like textile shops on Designer's Walk, and had like a lot of really great experiences there. But unfortunately, I was working in an industry that required a lot of clients with disposable income, and working in that industry during recession was really difficult. So I ended up going and getting a job at a law firm, and I was working in the law firm for about 3 years. Before, exploring different opportunities.
Okay, so really starting off creatively. So I guess tell us just a little bit, how did you get into dance in the first place? Was it something that, your parents put you in right from a young age, or was it a choice of your own?
It was a little bit of both. So my mom put me in when I was really, really young. I started dancing when I was 3. And that was mainly because I was obsessed with pink and princesses, and I just wanted to, play make-believe for my whole, childhood. So that was a great experience for my mom to just, get me out of the house, to get me to play with other kids and, expend that energy. And I stopped dancing when I was around 6. And for a few years, I was, kind of on the fence about going back and not going back. And then probably when I was about 10. It was my decision to go back. And right from the get-go, as soon as I stepped foot in my first, real life, ballet class, I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is my goal. I know exactly what I want to do with this. And I was passionate and I was driven and I was very disciplined.
Okay.
So did that for maybe 20 years.
And so where do you think that discipline and that passion came from at such a young age?
It was fun and it was challenging, and I think I had amazing mentors. I really did have some amazing people in my life that were nurturing but also very demanding of me, and it was a really great balance of that nurture plus drive. Like I was really motivated to not only do well for myself, but I wanted to make them happy as well.
Okay. And so then, like you said, you moved into teaching and you were really preparing to go into school, went into George Brown. And then what was the switch that made you change from dance into interior design?
Well, as you guys may know, ballet can be a very, very competitive industry, and it does rely a lot on how your body looks and how it looks next to the person beside you and next to the people you'll be dancing with. And unfortunately, I'm a short person. Like, I'm not a huge, tall human. So being 5'2" was working against me, and there's just some forces that I really couldn't control. And, it really came down to, am I going to push and struggle and, want to change things about me that I can't change, or am I going to find a way to make this work for me?
Okay.
And so, taking that creativity, I had to apply it to other things.
And so how did you get your break into interior design? Because I have a lot of people that come to me and are interested in that field, but have a really hard time breaking in, or they feel like they need the credentials, the education. So how did you make that work, and how did you get your foot in the door there?
It was really tough. You do need to push really hard for it. I decided, I was watching HGTV with my mom, and I was like, I'm going to try to do that. Like, that's really cool. So I was waiting until the end of the episodes to see the production companies and the channels and the production houses and, all of these different things. And I just got my laptop out one day and wrote emails to the production managers and the people who had names on the credits that, had titles that seemed kind of important. And someone from the Candace Olson design team got back to me, and that's how I kind of got my foot in the door.
And how did you convince them to kind of let you in and let you have at it? Because your background, of course, was creative, but not in the physical. Well, I guess ballet obviously is physical, but not in a physical design sort of way. How did you kind of foray or give them your story so that they would let you have the experience you had in interior design?
So I was in school for interior design while I was doing this.
Okay.
So that was great. I had at least Sheridan College behind me, and I had a few good references from the classes I was taking. But I also went the step further, and I created a specific portfolio that would speak to those people that I was contacting. So I went out of my way to do some renderings of, interiors that I thought up, or AutoCAD drawings of houses that I had seen, or something like that. And I included photography that I had done, costumes I had designed. I just went all out and thought, okay, what goes into planning an episode? What goes into creating a home and creating a place that people want to live? And I just spent hours and days drawing and rendering and putting together this portfolio I could send out.
Wow. Okay, so really, even in your early experiences, it's clear that you really had that take charge and use your own initiative to move forward. Even back at 10, like you're saying, you were the one who made the decision to pursue dance. And then with interior design, yes, you had some of the education backing you, but you're reaching out to people you don't even know. You're putting in all this effort. So an interesting nugget I'm going to take away for now, just that concept of your own initiative and following your own passion, really going after what you wanted. And so, like you said, the reality of the industry with a recession wasn't pretty. And so you moved into a law firm. And so tell me how you made that decision and how you got your foot in the door now into a law firm, a completely different environment again.
Yeah, so I ended up losing all 3 of my interior design jobs within 1 week. And I moved back home, and I was sitting at the table with my mom and dad, and I was like in tears, and I was so upset because, I was right out of school, and it was going so well, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And my mom actually owned her own business. She was a bookkeeper, and she was keeping the books for a whole bunch of criminal lawyers in downtown Toronto, and said that, I should reach out and see if they are hiring for any receptionists. And so I did. I'm the first, I called a criminal defense company, I guess a firm, and they weren't really looking. Like, they had someone that came in a few days a week, and then the calls were just kind of forwarded. And so I called another firm, and it was the same thing. It was like everyone who was working, they were kind of boomers. They were much, much older. The young people that they accepted into the firms were articling students, and they really didn't want to have to pay another salary. And then so finally I reached out to the latest firm that my mom had worked for and said, I really need a job, and I've been calling everyone, and I really, really needed to work, and I'm happy to do, whatever. I'll go to court, I'll answer phone calls, I'll get coffee, I'll do what I need to do. And then they brought me in. So I got really lucky there. And I spent 3 years working and organizing that office. And I ended up going from just answering the phone to, managing the filing systems and calendars for 5 lawyers, and, helping with the bookkeeping and getting, each lawyer out to court on time for their correct client, and arranging for out-of-town lawyers to go to out-of-town trials and stuff like that. So I evolved that role very easily. And, when I left, it was a tough decision because, I was leaving for something that I thought was going to be another great job, but it wasn't as stable as what I had. And I really, I have a soft spot in my heart for this firm that I worked for, because they really, took me in and took me under their wing when I was kind of down and out.
Mm-hmm. And so what made you decide to leave the law firm in the end? Because like you're saying, it wasn't a hard and fast, like you hated it and you wanted to leave. There was something though pulling you or driving you to make a change. And what was that?
I really didn't feel like I was building anything special. Like I really thought that to make myself happy, I had to go and do something that allowed me to be really creative. There was a lot of downtime in the office, and, I was in my early 20s, and I was just like, if I don't make the move to do something that I think is going to make me happy, that, I went to school for and that I was passionate about, then I don't want to wake up in 20 years in the same job wondering if I made a big mistake.
And so what was it that you transitioned into?
So I got offered a job at a very high-end carpet and textiles showroom in Designer's Walk. So it was back into interior design. And I was so excited about it, and I thought that it was going to be this amazing, amazing job. And to be perfectly honest, I lost my job on the second day that I was hired. They let me go on my second day. So I was kind of back on my parents' kitchen, just kind of crying and wondering, what am I supposed to do now?
Oh my gosh. And so retrospectively, because again, we're talking about using your past to inform your future. With that role that you lost after 2 days, you gave up this job, this position that you'd had for 3 years. And like you said, it wasn't creative. You weren't necessarily building something special like you wanted to. So it made sense for you to want to move on. But, is there any way, looking back now, that you could have known that this new role with the textiles wouldn't have lasted? Or really, do you think it was completely out of your control?
I do think it was beyond my control. As I've gotten older, I've come to terms with there's so many external forces at play that you really can't control a lot in your life. To be honest, I wouldn't have changed the experience at all. I think it taught me a really great lesson about taking chances, and that just because you take the chance doesn't mean it's going to work out and it's not going to be this beautiful fairy tale ending. It just might be a learning and a lesson for you instead of a blessing. But in this case, I think it was both.
And what do you think the lesson was that you learned out of that experience?
That failure is not a thing. Like, just because it didn't work out doesn't mean I failed.
Ooh, that is a good one, and I would like to highlight that, because I do find so many people who want to change careers or aren't happy and feel like they need to change careers. They do look at it that way, like it's a failure, or people who get let go from jobs. It's a failure. I didn't do well enough, or I made a wrong decision, so I have to stick with it. And I think the way you framed it is so much more useful and productive. It's not a failure. What do you learn from it, and what are you going to do next? And so when you did get let go from that position, what came next for you?
I cried a lot, and then I was unemployed for a very long time. I couldn't get a job in design. I couldn't go back to my old job because I hired somebody else to replace me. I was really stuck. I ended up going into retail, and I was working in retail for about 9 months before I got placed by a temp agency to work as a receptionist again. And then I just kind of was taking that time. I was going to school again. I was doing literally everything I thought I could do just to get back on set, high-performing 9-to-5 job that I thought was what I needed to get to.
And where did you get your next kind of break or your next entry into work again?
So I was working at Brookfield Property Management, and I was working for the First Canadian Place property management office. Mm-hmm. And I was working as a temp there, and then they transferred me to another building that desperately needed somebody at the front. So I was working at another Brookfield property that managed 2 different properties under one title. And then from there, I completed a degree in event management and went on countless job interviews. I interviewed so many times that I can't even count them. There were so many interviews that were being had, calls, phone interviews. I was looking to move anywhere just to get a job, and finally an experiential firm reached out to me, and they asked me to come in for a group interview. And originally the interview was for a brand ambassador, which is a position where you're handing out samples, or you're on the ground and you're providing key messaging to the people that are coming by, and it's guerrilla marketing. And that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the other side. I wanted to be planning it. Mm. So that's what I said in my interview. And they were like, oh, well, we don't really have anything open at the time. So I was like, okay, great. And then a week later, they called me back, and they were like, okay, you know what? Come on in. I want you to meet with our VP and CEOs, and we'll see what we can do for you. So I went in. I met with the CEO and the VP that I'd be working with, and then they offered me a job the next day. So I quit, and I was working in marketing for a while, and that's kind of where I've been since. I've been in various types of marketing jobs or relationship building jobs.
And so, again, this kind of reminds me a little bit about when you initially got into interior design, and that you you cold called all these people or emailed them, and you created your own portfolio, and you really gave them that value add or that proposition of what you could do for them, and really highlighted or showcased, I guess, what it was that you wanted to do. So in this experience, do you think it was kind of the same thing that you did here getting into marketing?
100%. And anytime I've left a job since then, it's always the same thing. It's cold calling, it's emailing, it's creating like a resume that stands out and then sending it to everybody. It's like networking through your friends and friends of friends and just trying to get your name and your resume noticed. And literally it's like by any means possible, I'll call a cell phone number that I find for, the person that works in the company that I want to work for. And then I will like call them and you get their email, and I'll email them my resume and write this amazing kick-ass cover letter and send it over and just hope for the best. And so that's kind of the experience I've had trying to get jobs anyways.
Yeah, so I think a lot of self-discipline and creativity going into your efforts of finding work. And so I guess if we take this, you've been in dance, interior design, you've had this background in TV, administration, law firms, property management, marketing, and this is all under the age of 30. So I am curious what comes next for you. But before we go there, I guess when you look back at your career history to date, what is it that you are most proud of? Is there, one or two things that really stand out for you?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think it's not necessarily the work that I've done that I'm proud of, but the fact that I've been let go from a few different jobs, and I feel like I've been kicked down, and you just have to pick yourself up and keep going. And I think the fact that from an outsider's point of view, it looks like I have failed down a lot, and it looks like I have kind of taken those tumbles. But to be honest, I've picked myself up and gotten a job, and I think something to take away from it is that jobs are out there and you can always get a new job. But it's the difference between getting a new job and getting a job that you're passionate about. And I think what I'm proud of is that I've been able to do both. I've had the jobs that I'm passionate and excited about, and I've had the jobs that I've had to have to pay my bills. So, that fact that I can keep picking myself up and keep going, and I've had a great support. And one thing that's been constant throughout my life is my mom keeps saying, it's always going to be okay. If it's not okay, it's just that it's not over yet. But in the end, everything's okay. So you just got to pick yourself up, you got to dust yourself off and keep going. And I'm proud that I can actually keep doing that. And it's a consistent thing that you have to do throughout every facet of your life.
Yeah, no, and I think that is a really big thing to be proud of. And hopefully it's something you employ, a couple more times in your career. I guess in your future, what do you see for yourself? Do you think you'll stay in the marketing sphere? Do you see something else for yourself? What comes next for you?
Yeah, so I think I really do enjoy the marketing industry. I think that we're in a pivotal point right now with marketing where it can go in a few different directions. I think content marketing is a really interesting facet of that world, and the more I explore it and the more I build into it, the more I buy into it. And I think that we're all kind of guilty of following these people on Instagram and being like, oh my God, they have a skinny tea, I have to try this. But the psychology behind it is very interesting, and I think you might have some great insights on that too. But I think that, the marketing side is really interesting. I think I really want to work on building and finding my way in the content marketing, influencer marketing realm of things.
Okay, and do you think from your experience so far, is there, you've talked about being passionate. And so being passionate about the field or the general, I guess, influence that content marketing can have is one thing. And you might not have a hard and fast answer to this, but do you see any specific things that you would want to be marketing, or things, because there'll be things you're more or less interested in or passionate about. Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I think there's two schools of interest for me. Part of it is like the stuff. Like I'm always interested in trying the new products and seeing what that looks like. But I'm also very passionate about traveling. And my mom used to say, my parents used to say that I was bitten by the travel bug very young. Instead of going to my high school graduation, I took off for Europe for 6 weeks alone. I do travel a lot, and I try to do at least one big trip a year. And I think trying to combine those two passions, the content marketing and the traveling, would be a really interesting and exciting opportunity. So it's trying, I think that's one way to grow and to, experience and experiment. But I'd also like to grow social media followings for other people as well. So there's a few different interests there that I'd like to explore.
And what is it about growing the content or growing the influence of someone else that appeals to you as much as growing your own following?
I'm very much like a background person. When it came to the TV thing, I was behind the camera. I was never in front of the camera. And I liked that, working really hard to build something beautiful that, like, you didn't necessarily need to take credit for it because people were seeing it and that was enough. And I've helped my boyfriend and some of his friends in the film industry build out their social media and get, a few more followers, or a few of my friends I've helped to, get like free products sent to them, which is something that they were passionate about. And helping people to build what they want and like to build towards the future that they were planning for, that's really special to me. And I think that's just as important as building my own future. It takes a village. You can't do anything alone. You always need that help. And I think recognizing where you can step in to help somebody is really beneficial.
And that's interesting because, again, with the theme of what we're talking about today, looking back, you've kind of already employed that throughout your career when you talked about teaching ballet and helping other ballerinas, other dancers prepare for their futures in dance. When you talked about interior design, and again, it's not your own home or your own TV show, but it's for other people. And then again, even in the law firm, as you grew your role there and you really started to take on ownership of organization and planning and keeping that office in check. Again, you're not running the law office. You're not the face of the law office, but you really played that pivotal role in there. I think that's really, really interesting, or another little nugget I would take away as well. And when I come across people that say similar things to you, I really think of them as directors. In your career, you're a director. You don't need to be, like you're saying, in front of that camera, but you're behind the camera and you're playing an instrumental role in the development of that movie or that picture or that outcome. Does that resonate with you when I kind of describe it that way?
100%, yes.
And so what do you think then about, the idea you have about your growing your own social media? In that way, I feel like you'd kind of be front and center. So what is it that appeals to you about that?
Well, that started as more of an experiment. I just got a job in digital marketing, and part of that was working so closely with our social media team. And I was like, okay, well, this is really interesting because people, take to Instagram and Facebook and Twitter to learn and to kind of crowdsource options and opinions. And so I was like, okay, well, let me play around a little bit with my current Instagram. And I grew it from like I started off with 300 followers to just like my personal account where I was posting pictures of my dog and like my lunch and my running shoes and, you know, some stuff that didn't really speak to anybody. I honed it a little bit and was applying some things that I was learning through my job as in digital marketing. And I ended up growing it to almost 15,000 followers within just a few months.
Wow.
So yeah, it was really interesting, and it was really from communicating with other people and just engaging with a community of strangers, basically, that were like-minded. And it was just really cool. And it was, I'm not going to lie, it was a bit of an ego boost to think that, wow, 15,000 people want to hear what I have to say about something. So that was really cool. So yeah, it was, and I see it as more of like I'm talking to my friends when I post to Instagram, even though, you know, the images are a little bit more polished than they were, you know, a year ago. But it's really cool.
I can definitely understand that ego boost, but also kind of a clear. It's interesting with Instagram specifically, or some of these other social media platforms where there's KPIs and metrics. There's a really clear measure of success, or when you're doing a good job, you see those numbers rise in such a short period. It of course is a ding, 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 you did a good job. And I guess for you, if I broaden that out, what for you does success mean in your life or your career?
So I think that success for life and career are very closely tied for me. Personally, I think I will be successful if I have a career in the future where I don't feel like I'm working. And, you know, it's like I don't wake up on a Monday morning and be like, oh, my God, I have to drive into work. Instead, I'm like, okay, it's Monday morning, and, you know, I have a list of stuff I want to do and I have to do, and, you know, let's get to work. And you flip open your laptop and you can work from your bed. Because for me, you know, you don't necessarily have to be in an office to be working. But I think that a big part of that is, you know, feeling content with what I'm building and with what I'm creating, and being able to have an outside life, like a life outside of my work that is fulfilling as well. And having the time to have a life outside of my work that is very fulfilling as well as a fulfilling career. So, you know, the big question is, how do we do that, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really refreshing to hear you describe success like that. Really, for you, if I were to kind of paraphrase, if you wake up and you feel excited about what you're going to do and you get to be in control and have the influence over your own career, that you get to plan out what your day, what your week, what your month looks like, and that can be flexible in terms of where you're working, when you're working, so that you do have that time for your personal life, that would kind of be ultimate success for you. And I think that's refreshing, because so many people, whether they say it or not, are so influenced by money or societal pressures of career status or moving up the career ladder. And I didn't hear you mention any of those things, but when I say those, you know, status, moving up the ladder, money, do those factor into your definition of success?
Not necessarily, no. And it's really funny because I come from a family that they were very traditional in, you know, you go to university, you get your degree, you get the job right after university, and you stay in that job until you retire. And you climb that ladder and you get the pay raises, and, you know, when you retire, you're top of the food chain in that company. And that's not something that I necessarily agree with. And I think what causes a lot of unhappiness in maybe our generation specifically is that traditional definition of success doesn't necessarily apply anymore. And I think that there's so many of us creating our own career paths that it just looks so different, and not a lot of people are maybe understanding it yet, or are open to, you know, that idea that success doesn't necessarily come with a title and a paycheck.
Yeah, and I personally agree with you. I think everyone defines success a little bit differently and what makes them feel really fulfilled and satisfied. I agree with what you're saying, though. And I think, well, I'm curious, what do you think it was that made you and your outcome in terms of what you're doing in your career and what you see as successful so different from your parents? How come you didn't follow in their shoes and kind of choose that more maybe linear career path?
Yeah, I tried really hard to. I did. I thought I did everything the way that my mom and dad did everything and the way that my sister's doing everything. And I tried so hard to follow that path, and it just didn't work. And I think, this might sound a little, out there, but at a certain point, I had to take a step back and say, okay, the universe is telling me something. And if I am working and putting so much effort to just work a 9-to-5 job and, get that linear path to success and it's not working, then maybe I have to readdress and kind of figure out why it's not working. And I think the why behind our actions and why, we're not doing things the way that we should, or why things aren't working out the way we want to, or it's a really important question to ask. I think for me, it may just not be who I am. I may just not be able to do 9 to 5, and that's okay. But I really did feel like for a long time, the universe was just telling me it's just not working, and that's not who you are.
Well, and I'm glad.
It's a lot of self-discovery too.
Well, I'm glad you've actually listened to that inner voice, because I think there are so many people who get those messages and they go against what that message says, or they go against that inner voice or what the universe is telling them, because they feel so rigidly that they have to do it the right way or the way they're supposed to do it. And so I think, again, this almost speaks to what you said earlier about taking chances, and really even like we hit on right from the beginning of our conversation, that taking initiative to figure it out yourself. It wasn't working for you. You realized that, you had the self-insight to recognize it, and then you did your own thing. And so I guess with how you're kind of describing what you want for your future in terms of success, and really in the marketing space and the content marketing space, how do you see yourself getting there? How are you going to make it work?
That's a really good question. I think that's what I'm still kind of figuring out. I am learning so much about the space. The good news is that it's new. So as much as I'm learning about it, so is everybody else. But yeah, that's kind of still what we need to figure out. Lots of learning ahead, I think.
And so if I kind of look back, because again, looking back to figure out your future, if I look at some of your skills or some of the strengths that you've brought to your career so far, really from an early age, you had that discipline, and you really took initiative. And so I think that's what you're starting to do already. You have to do that background learning and research and preparation, just like you did with that portfolio and those cold calls right from the beginning. Another thing you mentioned was having really good mentors. So do you have any mentors or people that you really look up to in that content space?
It's funny because social media is just full of people that you look up to, maybe for the wrong reasons, but there are a few Toronto-based influencers on my Instagram that I do, continually speak with and try to get advice from. But I also have a really great team at my job that I work at now. I'm working in digital marketing at a toy company, and the leader of the social media team is so knowledgeable, and she's so happy to share all the information that she has. And I find her to be a very valuable resource. And, she's more than just a coworker to me. Like, she's a friend. She's got a wealth of knowledge. She's very smart. She's very motivating, and she's a really, really great resource for me. So I definitely appreciate working with her. And it's also just, I am looking everywhere for the people who are doing what I want to be doing, like the end goal, and following their webinars and, writing them for advice on how to optimize my website or my Instagram, or, what they would think is a great kicking off point, and, how they go and speak to all of these brands that they endorse, and how they get these endorsements, and how they get these to be these ambassadors. So it's very similar to these cold calls and putting everything out there.
Yeah, it really sounds like you're in some ways on the right track, because what I see in your career, even though to date it's been very creative, there's also that part that there's already some structure in place. So for example, ballet has been around for, I don't know, I assume centuries, yet it's creative, and you can build your own dance in a way. Same with interior design. It's been around forever, but how you execute that career is your own. Your design is your own. And so I guess I kind of see that in the social media space as well. It's, it's a newer field for sure, but there are experts out there, people who have done it successfully, yet you can take it and make it your own. And it's funny because right at the beginning or earlier in our call, what you said for what you want to, I don't know what context you used it in, but I wrote it down in quotations in my notes that you want to build something special. And that's exactly in a way what you're looking to do. So I think it is very fitting, and it makes a lot of sense. With how you're going to move forward, do you have, I guess, between now and perhaps the day you retire, do you envision, 1 to 3 things that you really want to accomplish before you retire?
Part of me thinks that retiring is going to be kind of closing down the social media and working as a consultant. I would really love to build and to help people build their social media followings. I think it's really important for, especially people in higher paying jobs or higher visibility jobs, to have some sort of social media following, so that they can, create the persona, and they can present the persona that they want projected. So I would really love to do some work with that. My number one would be to be able to travel and write freelance and travel the world and, review hotels or my experiences, and kind of share that knowledge with people and get paid for it, because that sounds like it's an amazing opportunity. It could be a pipe dream, could not be, but, we'll see when it happens. And I think I would just really love to, like you said, build something special.
Mm-hmm. And so with everything that you've learned to date, in your career and in your kind of career progression, if you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, and at 18 you were dancing, and I'm guessing you didn't envision yourself where you are now, what would you go back and tell yourself after everything you've learned?
Oh yeah, 18-year-old me was definitely very siloed in thinking that I was going to dance Swan Lake with the National Ballet, regardless of being like 8 inches too short. That was what 18-year-old me was thinking, for sure. But if I could go back, I would say that it's okay. It's not a linear path. Personally, I feel like I failed up. I have lost jobs. I've been laid off. I've been let go. But it's always okay, and it's always going to be okay. I think I would also maybe try to streamline the thinking a little bit, because looking back, it's very scrambled, even though the common theme throughout my working history has been creativity. It's really scrambled. It went from dancing to design to events to marketing. And, you can see how it all works together, but it's a little scrambled, and I think that there was a lot of years that could have been used a little bit more efficiently. But I think 18-year-old Jess would probably have rejected that information anyways because she was headstrong and stubborn. So,
and we can look at that as a blessing or a curse, but it got you to where you are today. But I am curious, what when you say there's time that could have been used differently, again, this could maybe help us in, or help you in considering your future. If you look back, what would you have done differently now that you can see it? Hindsight's 2020. You can't change it now, but what would you have done differently?
I think I would have gotten on the Instagram marketing a little bit sooner. Like if I had the knowledge I have now, or even like a smidgen of the knowledge I have now about content marketing and Instagram and how you can influence people and influence, and show, your opinion and have it matter to people and have it be helpful. I think I would have jumped on that bandwagon a little bit sooner. I held off a long time on getting Instagram and Facebook and social media, which is funny because now it's my whole life. But I think the years I spent resisting it instead of embracing it and kind of building from the get-go, well, not necessarily wasted, but it was an opportunity I didn't have the wherewithal to actually see.
And so if you kind of consider that path, again, hindsight's 2020, you can say, oh, I should have jumped on that social media influencer bandwagon earlier. Fast forward to today, are there things now that are just in early days that could really take off and could help you with what you want to achieve? Are there things outside of Instagram or things about Instagram that you should be looking into or jumping on that are more innovative? Like, I don't know.
And that's a good question. I think what I'm taking away from all of this reflection from, my past, all the way up back to high school, I think one key thing for me to keep in mind is that opportunity never looks the same. It comes in all different shapes and sizes. And you have to keep your eyes open for it, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. Whether or not I'm doing a good job of it, we'll see in a few years when we reflect on it. But yeah, we'll see. It's difficult to see what the next big thing is going to be. But I think there are a few innovations that are coming along with Instagram and with content marketing in general that are very helpful. And there's a wealth of resources that explain what's happening in that industry and in that world. So it's a lot of research and reading and, learning the space and being an expert in the space that you want to be in.
And because you've talked, so much about really success being something that you enjoy, that you love, there's an element of building and creating. So obviously there's the building and creating that comes with building that content marketing, that influence. What is it, I guess, in your day-to-day life or even looking back in the roles that you've held, is there something that you can identify that's really been the most satisfying or fulfilling part of your work, of your day?
I'm thinking about it, and I was working with a charity where I used to travel across Canada, and I managed the sponsorship for these events, and there were these huge stadium-sized events for kids. So it'd be like a rock show midday for kids in elementary school that did amazing things in their lives, and we kind of celebrated it. And what I found very, very fulfilling about that job was seeing how the sponsors reacted to these inspirational people and, talking to the kids that, raised money to take a trip to Kenya to build a well in the Masai Mara. And that interaction and seeing all of that come together was really satisfying. And thinking back to my events, again, it was seeing everything come together And, I worked on the book launch for Arlene Dickinson when she launched her book, Persuasion. And seeing that book launch all come together and seeing her face and how happy she was that day, it was really, really special. And those are the moments that, I look at it and yes, this is great. This is a good day. Those countless hours, the sleepless nights, this makes it worth it. So, it's having those kind of aha moments that were feeding my soul for a while.
And so it's interesting to think if that's what has kind of given you the biggest joy, the biggest aha, seeing that, what I would call it is almost kind of a concrete, visible outcome of happiness and success at the end of the day, the influence or the impact that you're having on other people. It's interesting because
it's tangible.
Tangible is a good word.
Yes.
And so again, with what you're considering for your future career, it has an element of that. Are there other ways that you can bring in people and have that aha with other people involved too? I'm not sure. Maybe that comes more in the consulting space later on in your career, but a good thing to again, I'd say just tuck away because that's what's given you the greatest joy so far. So I guess, really it's been great to talk to you, and I think really interesting to kind of navigate through your past and consider the future. And having this conversation, I guess, are there any big, takeaways or insights that you've had talking with me today?
Well, I've loved it, first of all, so thank you. And I think one of the big takeaways is that you laid it out really well for me, saying that, I always say I want to build something special, but it doesn't mean anything sometimes when you say it too often. So hearing it said back to me, it was yes, actually that's the drive here, is to build something that is special to me and is unique to me and that I feel means something and that, allows me to have the freedom to enjoy my personal life, but also really enjoy my working life. So I think that's my biggest takeaway here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been so great to have you on and for you to be so open and so honest and willing to, share your successes where things have gone a little sideways. But like you said, you have failed up. I love that term. I'm going to use that with other people. I've really appreciated all your sharing today. So what we will do now is bring this segment of our show to a close, and I'll be back in a few minutes just to summarize my takeaways from today.
Thanks so much for having me, Megan.
You're welcome. Well, I'm back now after a great conversation with Jess about her career. And I will say on a personal level, I really loved this episode because I really think it gets to the heart of what this show is all about and what I do in my career on a day-to-day basis, which is really help people consider their own background, their own past, and really use that information to help them inform their future and build their future out in their career. And you could hear with Jess, she does have, some ideas and I will say a general idea of what she wants for her future. And it was so interesting looking back at her past that you could see, some of the key things that we hit on. Right from an early age, she had that discipline. And with any sport, any dance, any athletics, when you take it that seriously, what I've seen across so many athletes is the discipline, the hard work, the countless hours, the injuries, and they just work through it. And that's what she did. You can see that through her dance and through the rest of her career, that she picked herself up, she dusted herself off, and she kept going. She also had that initiative and that drive and the stubbornness, as she called it, to make it work. When she wanted something, she went after it and she didn't give up. Like she said, there's times where she had to just take a job to pay the bills. But really, at the end of the day, she didn't just sit there and play it out. She really made it work to her benefit and she got the most out of it that she could. Even, for example, at the law firm, which may have been one of her least creative jobs, she built her influence and was able to expand her role into really taking on more ownership of a number of different tasks. So it wasn't as just straightforward as it was when she started. So those are two huge things that I see in Jess. Another thing that popped out to me was really the influence of reality factors. So she hit on this. She can't control everything in her career and along the way. And I think nobody can. You can plan for things as best you can. And I always would recommend doing as much research as you can, talking to people who are in those roles, so you know as best you can the reality of what you're getting yourself into. But in her case, the reality was, there are recessions that impacts the market. If you don't have the right body type to be a dancer, things happen. And again, she showed that initiative of dusting herself off and moving along. I really like that she was able to clarify that building something special a little more with us on our episode today, and really hitting on those aspects of travel and products, and how I think she's still navigating, but how she can really fit this all together and build it into a lifestyle and a career that she is passionate about, that fulfills herself and makes herself happy. That's what she talked about so much. So I really think through her career, she's it hasn't been linear, but it really does have that woven thread of creativity, looking for something that, feeds her soul, makes her passionate. And she's slowly kind of moved closer and closer towards that, which I think is so exciting and so interesting for her. And I think really will resonate with a lot of our listeners out there who probably have had careers where, again, somebody else might look at it and say, oh, you've jumped from industry to industry, or you have all these things. What is this? It's an eclectic mix. But really, it's what ties it all together. What are the threads? And for her, of course, that element of creativity, having that tangible outcome that she can feel proud about at the end of the day, making herself happy, feeling passionate about it. I think another aspect is that leading from behind the scenes. She mentioned that, and that's an interesting snippet of she doesn't need to be front and center, but helping other people create their visions or grow their dreams is an element of that too. And there is a big helping component that has kind of woven in throughout her career as well. So it's interesting to see. And I guess the takeaway for everyone out there listening is, what are those threads that run through your career? What are the parts of your career or the aspects of your job that get you to wake up in the morning and be excited? The parts of your career that you really get a sense of flow. Time just flies when you're doing it because you actually enjoy it. And how can you use that information to inform your future and think about what is it that's going to give you that same drive? And to, like Jess, to have that general goal, that long-term vision of where she sees herself in her career. I think there's a lot of people who would be out there and just poo-poo their own dreams and say, oh, that's not realistic, or, oh, I can't do that. And instead of, beating that dream down, think about how you can achieve it. How can you get there? And it's not going to be a clear-cut path, and it doesn't have to be. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you've taken more information, you've learned more things, and you can use all of that information again to keep informing your future. And so again, really happy to have Jess on the show today. I hope you all learned a lot from what she had to share, and kind of the themes and questions that I asked her to pull out some of this great, useful information. I hope you can apply that in your own lives. So with that, I will close the show for today. So I hope everyone has a great Monday, and maybe you're not going to have a 9-to-5 work day. Maybe you don't want a 9-to-5 work day, but if you do, enjoy yours, and we'll be back with you next week on Career Cravings.
The career discussion doesn't stop here. For more information about how to transform your career, visit CanadaCareerCounseling.com. And remember to tune in next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bold Radio Station for the next episode of Career Cravings.